Is your witness here?
Yes.
All right, you can bring her in to sit right in the back. That way we can just call her up when the jury comes in.
Your Honor, I'm just trying to anticipate things that may come up during her testimony. One of the questions may come up is she heard gunshots. One of the things that I anticipate may come up is, well, why didn't you report it to the police when you found out there was a triple murder across the street? I anticipate a response is going to be, well, I thought they caught him and he confessed. That's why I didn't feel needed. So I want to give the court and counsel the heads up that that issue is going to get into, and that's going to be her reason for not reporting it.
All right. I assume, will the defense have an objection?
Yes.
But what's the objection?
Speculating about whether he...
No, that's not speculation. That's her reason why.
Mr. Stone, if you could, first of all, not address counsel and address the court.
Yes.
I'd appreciate it.
Yes.
All right? Go ahead, Mr. Shapiro.
Okay. So in order for it not to be speculation, there has to be a basis of knowledge. So without a basis of knowledge, it would be speculation. I'm sure there's not going to be a predicate laid as to how she heard about it, or she was watching the news and heard that he confessed. That would all be inadmissible, which would be lack of the predicate, therefore, to say that she heard it was a confession case. That I would just argue that it needs to be broken down a lot more than that, and it's not that simple as just to say that.
Response.
And my response is that's her reason. That's the basis for her not reporting it. It's not speculation. That's it. Now, if I don't get into it, then fine, I won't. But then counsel, if we want to avoid the issue, then I won't ask about it. But then counsel shouldn't ask. If they're going to ask, then I'll ask. But if they won't, I won't.
Okay. All right.
Judge, I would say, I'm sorry, I would just say it's
The court,
inadmissible.
the court would indicate, first of all, however I'm not going to tell you guys how to ask your questions. That'll be entirely up to you. It's your job on how you decide to present your cases. I will say this, though. If the question's asked, the court can, at that point, go forward at that time. If the state opens the door, if the state mentions it and the objection is there, based upon what's been testified to, if there's speculation or lack of predicate, I'll rule accordingly at that time. But then if the defense ends up questioning at that point and opens the door, then the court can rule at that time. So that's just what I would say at this point, but I'm not going to tell you guys how to do your job.
I understand that, but the observation I want to make is if I agree not to ask it because they're objecting to it, I think it would be a little bit disingenuous for them to ask about it. So I won't ask about it if they're objecting to it.
Okay.
And our opinion would be that would open the door if we did ask. So
Okay.
That's why we're not planning on it.
Okay. All right.
No one she's going to say.
All right.
Then I won't ask.
We're on the same page.
Okay, so I think everybody's on the same page, so there's no issue, Mr. Stone.
All right,
All
thank
right,
you.
Deputy Bradley, is the other juror here? Do you know? Did you just? They did? Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't see you in the courtroom. All right, then can you bring them in? And at the same time, is your witness in here?
Yes, she's in the waiting room.
Ms. Atkins, can you go get her?
Yes.
Thank you.
And
Hope everyone had a good lunch. At this point, state's continuing their case. State, you may call your next witness.
Jennifer Sawyer.
Ms. Sawyer, please come forward, ma'am, to the podium. Raise your right hand. Be ready to be sworn.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the complete truth, so help you God. I do. Thank you.
Could please have a seat in the witness stand where the court deputy is instructing you. Now, when you have a seat, ma'am, if you could move the chair up as close as you can to that desk and see that box that's right there in the front with the black right in the center.
Okay, yes.
That's the actual microphone for the courtroom. So if you could just talk straight ahead towards that way it can pick you up. All right, Mr. Stone, you may proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon. How are you?
As good as to be expected, a little nervous.
A little nervous. We'll try not to be nervous, okay? I'm just going to ask you a few questions, so try to relax and not be nervous. First, can you please tell us what is your name?
Jennifer Sawyer.
Can you spell your first name and your last name, please?
JENNIFERSAWYER.
And Ms. Sawyer, where do you live?
I live at, and that's in Chiliota.
And Where is, well, do you know Picket Downs and Sultan Circle?
Yes, I've lived in that area for the last 30 years.
Where is Picket Downs and Sultan Circle in relation to where you live?
It's right across the road. I live on Fort Christmas Road, and Sultan Circle's property butts up to the Fort Christmas Road also. I'm on the front of it, and they're on the back of it.
Now, let me direct your attention to January 24th, 2019, the evening into nighttime time period. First, were you home?
Yes, I was.
And anything happen, or did you hear anything happen that evening that caught your attention? You can answer that yes or no, and then I'll get into it.
Yes, I did.
First, tell the jury, please, about what time was it that you heard, and I'm going to talk about that, but what you heard that got
Okay.
your attention.
It was between 8:30 and 9:30 at night.
Now, tell the jury what you heard.
I heard gunshots, and I heard them one right after another. And I know that it was less than 5 shots fired, because at the time, I made a mental note that that was strange to hear gunfire at that time of night. I mean, it had been dark then for hours.
Okay, so let me ask you, so you know that it was less than 5 shots? Mm-hmm. More, yes?
Yes, I do, less than
And
5 shots.
more than a particular number? Less
Well,
than?
I know there's more than one. You know, I didn't count them. I just, as I was listening, I know it was less than 5 and more than one.
And it was successive, in other words, one right after another?
Yes, it was one right after another.
And tell us, where did these shots come from? Where did they sound like?
I was in the kitchen, which my kitchen window faces Fort Christmas Road in the back of Lake Picket Downs, and they came from that direction.
And could you tell if the shots were coming from inside the house or outside the
I
house?
could not tell that, no. I don't know.
And did you think it was unusual to
Yes.
hear shots?
Yes, I did. And so what I did was, my husband was out back working in the shed on our pump because our water had gone out, and that's the reason I'm aware of the timing also. And so I waited to hear if I heard any more shots, and when I didn't, I went out back and I asked him, I said, "Did you hear that gunfire?" And he's like, "No, I didn't hear anything." And I said, "Well, do you think we should call the police?" You know, I said, "Don't you think it's strange?" And he, said, "We hear shots out here," and
Okay. Now let me ask you this. You said that it was unusual. Was it unusual for that time of night?
yes, because it had been dark for a while. I mean, that's over the winter months, so that's what kind of was unsettling for me. It was unsettling for me.
Let me kind of follow up on that. During the daytime, would it be unusual to hear shots every now and then?
No.
Why not?
Well, because, we live on 2.5 acres, and we have weapons, and we'll shoot target practice, and I fired a .22 and a 9mm, so it's not unusual to hear gunshots. It was just unsettling for me at that time of night, because I was trying to think, what would somebody be firing at that time of night?
Okay, and you kind of anticipated my next question when you said that you shot a .22. Are you familiar with guns? And are you familiar with gunshots? You know what a
Yes.
gunshot is?
Yes.
And why do you say that?
Well, like I said, we do have weapons at our house, and we do occasionally, have target practice. We'll set up pumpkins or cans or stuff and, shoot at them.
All right, thank you. I have nothing more.
Eddie Cross?
Good afternoon, Ms. Sawyer. You said the night that you heard these shots.
Mm-hmm.
Just the night of. You did not call the police, correct?
No, I did discuss it with my husband, though.
Okay.
And he didn't hear him, and, you know, he said maybe somebody was shooting at a snake or something, so we dismissed it.
So he did not think it was appropriate to call the police at that time, correct?
No, he did not.
Okay. And you did say before you couldn't tell if the shots were inside the home or outside the home,
No, I
correct?
could not tell that. I would not know that, no.
Okay. One moment, Judge. No further questions, Judge.
Members of the jury, do you have any questions of this witness? And everyone's indicating no. All right, may this witness be excused and released.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Sawyer. You're excused and you're released. Is your next witness here?
I don't know.
All right, can we check?
1:30, this one.
All right, who's your next? Next witness is, who's state calling for their next witness?
Dr. Tera Jones.
All right. If we could check on Dr. Tera Jones, please. Dr. Jones, if you could please come forward, raise your right hand at the podium, be ready to be sworn.
I swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the complete truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you.
Could you please have a seat in the witness stand as the deputy instructs you?
All right, you may proceed, Mr. President.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Please tell us your name.
My name is Tera Jones, spelled T-E-R-A, last name J-O-N-E-S.
What do you do for an occupation?
I'm a forensic pathologist.
And how long have you, well, let me ask you, where do you work?
I currently work at Districts 5 and 24 Medical Examiner's Office in Leesburg.
And I'm sorry, where is that located?
In Leesburg, Florida.
Ray County?
Yes.
And tell the jury your educational background, please.
I went to university at the University of Colorado State University in Fort Collins for 4 years. Following that, I did a 4-year stint in medical school at the University of Illinois, graduated with my medical doctorate. The next 4 years were at Rush University Medical School in Chicago, where I was an anatomic and clinical pathology resident. Following that, I did a single-year subspecialty training called a Forensic Pathology Fellowship, and that was in the Cook County Medical Examiner's Office.
And after your education and training, can you tell us your professional work experience? Where did you actually work as a forensic pathologist?
I stayed in the Cook County Medical Examiner's Office for approximately 3 years. After that, I had a brief trip in Colorado, worked for a coroner's office. And then following that, I moved to Canada and worked there for 7 years. And then I've worked here for about a year.
Are you board certified in forensic pathology?
I am.
And please tell the jury, how do you get your board certification in forensic pathology, and how do you maintain the certification?
So first, you have to be board certified in pathology, either anatomic or clinical or both. That was attained after I went to an accredited medical school and residency program. I had to take a national examination in anatomic and clinical pathology, and then I did my subspecialty training year, the fellowship year in Cook County, where I also had to take another national examination. I'm expected to maintain my credentialing by going to conferences and reading different articles and books and everything like that.
What is forensic pathology?
It is a disease where it is the practice of medicine where we determine cause and manner of death.
And can you give the jury some sense, I'm not asking for an exact number, but can you give the jury some sense of the number of autopsies you've conducted in your career?
So I stopped counting at 2,500 autopsies, and that was 8 years ago. So and I've probably done over 250 a year since then.
So we're talking thousands.
Yes.
And have you previously testified as an expert in the field of forensic pathology?
I have.
And once again, can you give us a sense or approximately how many times have you so testified?
Over 60 times.
Tell the jury what generally, I'm going to of course get more specific as we go along, but generally, what does a medical examiner do?
So our job is to determine cause and manner of death. Oftentimes, we'll do an autopsy to assist us in that. Many times we read the medical records associated. We review the scene photographs and scene information that's available. Sometimes we'll use toxicology, which is examining the fluids that are present in the body for any toxins or poisons that are present. We also can use histology, which is looking at the tissues underneath the microscope. So it's a lot of things can be involved in doing an examination.
Now, Dr. Jones, we've all heard of the word or the term autopsy, but tell us, what is an autopsy, and describe the purpose of it and a typical autopsy procedure.
So it's a detailed examination of the body. It usually begins starting from the external view as the body is received, and we also do x-ray examination so we can see if there are any foreign bodies that are present inside the body or with the body bag. We look for any types of foreign substances present on the surface of the body before we do any manipulation. We can then do the examination for any injuries that are present. We look for natural disease processes that are present. And then, of course, everybody is probably aware that we look at the organs, which is opening the body, looking at the organs, and we document any injuries that are present there. We take our tissues for toxicology, and then we write the report.
And tell the jury, please, when is an autopsy required or done in Florida?
Autopsies are generally when the circumstances of the death are sudden and unexpected, or if there are some suspicious circumstances, and even sometimes when families request the autopsy, when it falls under the purview of the medical examiner's office.
Now, did you have an occasion to conduct an autopsy on the body of a person identified to you as Margaret, or identified as Margaret Amato?
Yes.
And let me put on the overhead States Exhibit 296, already been introduced into evidence. And if you need to refer to your file to refresh your recollection, please let us know.
I would like to refer to the file, please.
Okay, if you need to. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put on the overhead of States Exhibit 296 and ask you, is this the person upon whom you conducted the autopsy that was identified as Margaret Amato?
Yes, it is.
Now, with the exception of the head, I'm going to ask you more detailed questions about the head, but with the exception of Margaret Amato's head, can you describe the external condition of her body?
This is certainly where I'd like to be able to use the report.
If it would help you and assist you in your testimony, you may refer to your file.
Yes, please.
With the court's permission?
Would it refresh your recollection?
Yes.
You may do so.
She was received clad in a blue t-shirt, black pants, white and purple panties, and a pink bra. She had a couple of rings on her left ring finger, and a metal key accompanied her. She was well developed and well nourished, and she was cold to touch following refrigeration. There was mild rigor mortis present, and lividity was present on the chest, the back of the thighs, the buttocks, and there was some congestion in the left side of the left arm.
Let me ask you, I'm sorry to interrupt, but what is lividity?
Lividity is the settling of the blood that occurs after death. Okay. And there was some bloody fluid on her face, arm, hand, a small amount on the right hand and on the top of the right and left foot. Her hair was medium length, brown with gray, and her eyelids were closed. She had blue eyes and pierced ears.
Anything, let me ask you, once again, with the exception of the head, I'm going to ask obviously more questions about Margaret Amato's head. But anything exceptional or out of the ordinary with regard to the condition, external condition of the rest of her body?
With the exception of her head, there was a green bruise on the front of her left thigh.
Now, let me ask you some questions about her head. And the first obvious question is, describe the external appearance of Margaret Amato's head.
So the one thing that was most remarkable was that there were gunshot wounds identified on her face and head. And of note, on the left occipital scalp, which is the back of the head on the left side, there was an oval gunshot wound entrance.
And continue, did you observe an exit wound?
Yes, and then so the other wound on the right cheek was a exit wound.
Mr. Dowdy, states Exhibit 11E for identification, 11F for identification. Actually, they're identical, so I'll take that out. 11H for identification, 11I for identification, and 11J for identification.
So is it 11E?
11G, H, I, and J?
Yes, although I'm not going to proffer into evidence 11G, because they're identical with another photograph, Your Honor.
All right. So it'll be 11E, F, H, I, and J. All right.
Let me show you what's been marked for identification as states exhibits 11E, F, 11E, 11F, 11H, 11I, and 11J, and ask you to look at those and tell me if you recognize them.
These are images that were taken during the course of the autopsy and one of the diagrams that I used during the autopsy.
And with regard to the images, the photographs, is it a true and accurate representation of that which it purports to depict, namely the injuries to Margaret Amato's head?
Yes.
And with regard to the diagram, is that an accurate description of the wounds on Margaret Amato's head?
Yes.
And would that assist you in explaining your testimony to the jury?
Yes.
You think it would assist the jury in understanding your testimony?
Yes.
Okay, I'd offer these into evidence as state's exhibits, Your Honor. No objection, Your Honor.
All right, what's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 11E will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit, are we on 319? 320 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 3F will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 321 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 11H will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 322 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 11I will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 323 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 11J will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 324 in evidence.
Now, Dr. Jones, I'm first going to put states 320 up on the overhead, and I think there should be a laser pointer over there.
Yes,
If not, you can use the mouse as well.
okay,
There's a mouse right there.
okay.
Let me put states 320 and explain to the jury what do we see here.
We're currently looking at Ms. Amato laying face down with the right side of her face on the table, and the left side of the head is up. And you can see on the left upper portion of the image, I'm encircling here, is the gunshot wound entrance.
Okay. Let me show you States Exhibit 321.
For efficiency purposes, Mr. Stone, if you want to keep them there until you're done with them, then you can bring them up to the clerk if you need to, the photographs.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Dr. Jones, did you have an occasion to conduct an autopsy on the body of a person that was identified as Chad Amato?
Yes,
Let me put on the overhead what's already been introduced into evidence as States Exhibit 297 and ask you, is this the person upon whom that you conducted the autopsy that was identified as Chad Amato?
it is.
And same question that I asked with regard to Margaret. I'm going to ask you about Chad Amato's head in a moment or two, but first let me start out. With the exception of Chad Amato's head, describe the external condition of Chad Amato's head. Body.
Okay. May I refer to my report on this case, this one as well?
If I'll refresh your recollection.
I will.
You may.
He was received clothed in a gray short-sleeved sweater, gray jeans, black belt, white boxer briefs, white socks on each foot, and black slip-on shoes. He was well-developed. There was bloody fluid present on his face, arms, and hands, and he had short gray hair. As far as injury not present on the head, he had some injuries that would be described as blunt force trauma or something that is non-sharp impacting the body that causes either a scrape or a tear or a bruise. On the right chest, there was a purple bruise. On the right upper back, there was a diagonal abrasion, which is a scrape. Also on the right upper back, there was another linear red abrasion, and around that was a purple bruise. On the right upper back and shoulder, there was another abrasion or scrape. And on the back of the right forearm, there was a small red abrasion. On the back of the right wrist, there are small red abrasions, and associated with those, there was a purple bruise. On the back of the right index finger, there are red abrasions or scrapes. On the front and medial portion of the left, arm, there were punctate or small round red abrasions. And on the back of the left arm, there was a red abrasion or a scrape. On the back of the left forearm, there were red abrasions, very small, 0.1 to 0.2 inches. On the front of the left thigh, there are red abrasions. Once again, these were also very small, 0.1 inches. And on the back of the left leg, there was a small scrape.
Now, with regard to Chad Amato's head. First, let me ask you, did you observe what in your training and experience is a bullet or bullets entry wounds?
I did.
And tell the jury where these entry wounds were located.
I saw bullet entry wounds present behind the right ear and on the back of the head.
Let me first ask you and have you talk about the wound that was you observed in the entry wound in the back of the ear. First, tell the jury what ear, and as I asked you with Margaret Amato, describe the path of the bullet, its direction, and any internal organs or damage done to Chad Amato's body by that particular bullet, the one behind the ear.
Okay. So beginning on the back of the right ear, there's a gunshot wound entrance. And this one was associated with some kind of abrasions on the back of the ear. And it was focally lacerated, or the skin was torn. And I noticed that it went through the ear, and then it re-entered through the tragus, which is an area that's commonly pierced by some people of the ear, and it re-enters into the cranial cavity and then exits on the right forehead. So it was one wound track with multiple different entrances, exits, and then re-entries and re-exits. That one involved the skin and soft tissue in the area. It involved the temporal bone of the skull. It goes through the right frontal lobe of the brain. It fractures the right frontal bone of the skull.
And tell the jury the direction of that particular bullet.
And that wound course was from back to front, and it's from right to left and upwards.
Showing counsel what's been marked as state's exhibits for identification: 11O, 11P, 11Q, 11R, 11S, 11T, 11U, 11V, 11W, and 11W. May I approach the witness, Your Honor? Let me show you the exhibits that I just named off just a moment ago and ask you to look at those, please.
Okay. Okay,
Recognize those?
I do.
And what are they?
These are images taken during the examination of Mr. Amato.
And are they of the particular entry wound to the ear that we talked about a moment ago?
The entries and exits on the ear and head and face.
True and accurate, are those photographs true and accurate representations of the injury to that particular part of Chad Amato's body?
Yes.
I'd offer this into evidence as a state's exhibit or exhibits. No objection, Your Honor.
It is 11O through 11U. 11W. All right, what's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 11O will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 326 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 11P will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 327 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 11Q will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 328 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 11R will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 329 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 11S will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 330 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 11T will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 331 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 11U will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 332 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 11V will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 333 in evidence. And what's pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 11W will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 334 in evidence.
Dr. Jones, let me show you what's been introduced into evidence. On State's Exhibit 326, and tell the jury what this photograph depicts.
So right now, we're looking at the right side of Mr. Amato's face. We can see the right ear, and these labels are associated with gunshot wound injuries. We're not clearly seeing part of the ear, but you can kind of see just a hint of the injury as it exits from the back of the right ear and the helix right here. And then here is where the bullet re-enters into the right tragus. And then this is the exit on the right forehead.
Let me show you 327.
So now we're looking at the back of the right ear of Mr. Amato, and you can see that there's a gunshot wound entrance on the back of the right ear.
Let me show you 328.
And this is the right side of the face and head, and this is just before the markers have been placed, and we can see the injury on the tragus.
329.
This is another image of the right side of the face and head, and these are with the markers placed. You can see the injury on the right ear, right tragus, and then the right forehead.
330.
This is an image of the exit wound on the right side of the forehead.
331.
Here we can see a little bit better the injury through the ear, the helix of the right ear, the right tragus, and then we can also see the exit on the right forehead.
And the injuries on the shoulder, they appear to be injuries. Can you tell the jury about that?
Those are the abrasions that I talked to you guys about earlier. You can see that there's a scrape here on the right shoulder and upper back, and then another scrape on the right upper back area.
States 332.
We're looking at a close-up of the gunshot wound exit on the right forehead.
Now, Dr. Jones, before I show you the next couple of photographs, do you use dowels or rods in your practice?
Occasionally, if it looks like it's going to be a somewhat complex wound track, I'll place a rod to make it more understandable.
And that's kind of like you anticipated my question. What's the purpose of the rods? Why do you do that?
Just so that some of these more complicated wound tracks can be identified.
Let me show you what's been introduced in evidence as State's Exhibit 333. Tell the jury what that depicts.
So, just to show everybody that this wound track actually does match up from the back of the ear through the tragus and through the head and exiting on the scalp.
Excuse me. And 334.
And this is a close-up of that.
Now, with regard to that particular wound track, the one that enters from behind the ear, can you tell the jury the direction and the path of the bullet?
That one was from back to front, right to left, and upwards.
Now, you observed a second gunshot wound?
I did,
Chad Amato's head?
yes.
Tell the jury about that. Where was the entrance wound?
So this was on the back, the right side of the scalp. And would you like me to continue on?
Yes, please.
And this wound involved the skin, the soft tissue in the area, involved the right occipital bone of the skull, and the cerebellar hemisphere of the brain. It crosses the midline at the level of the pons, and it continues to involve the left temporal lobe of the brain, the left frontal lobe of the brain, and the left frontal bone of the skull, and it exited on the left forehead.
And the path and direction of the bullet, which direction was it going?
This one was from back to front, right to left, and upwards.
I'm showing counsel what's been marked for identification as 11X, 11Y, 11Z, and 12A, 12B. May I approach the witness, Robin?
You may.
Let me show you the exhibits that are marked for identification that I just called off a couple seconds ago and asked you to look at it.
Okay.
Look at them.
Okay.
Do you recognize those?
I do.
And can you tell the jury what these photographs depict?
They're images taken during the autopsy of Chad Amato.
And are they true and accurate depictions or representations of that second wound that you observed?
Yes.
I'd offer them into evidence as a state's exhibit, Your Honor. No objection.
What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 11X will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 335 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 11Y will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 336 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 11Z will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 337 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 12A will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 338 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 12B as in boy will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 339 in evidence.
Yeah, publish it, Your Honor.
You may.
Let me show you State's Exhibit 335. And can you tell the jury what does that depict?
So we're looking at the back of Chad Amato's head, and just for reference, over here is that gunshot wound that we previously described on the right ear, and here in the hair on the back of the right side of the scalp, we can see an injury, which will be the gunshot wound entrance number 2.
Let me show you State's 336.
So in order to better look at an image, or look at injuries that are present on a body, especially in an area where there is hair in the way, I'll shave that hair out of the way so I can get a better idea for what the injury looks like. And so this is what this image shows. That you can see now the gunshot wound entrance on the back of the right head, and with the hair shaven.
State's Exhibit 337.
Now we're looking at him laying on his back, and we see the left frontal portion of the scalp or the forehead. And this is an image where the hair on the scalp is also being shaven, so you can see the injury.
State's Exhibit 338.
And this is that injury prior to shaving of the wound.
And State's Exhibit 339.
And this is a close-up of that gunshot wound exit on the left frontal scalp with the hair shaven.
showing counsel states Exhibit 12D for identification. May I approach the witness, Your Honor? Let me show you 12D for identification. Ask if you recognize that photograph,
I do.
and tell the jury what that photograph is.
This is an image of Chad Amato as he was received in the autopsy suite,
In his clothing?
in his clothing.
And is that a true and accurate photograph of Chad Amato as he was received in his clothing?
It is.
Okay, I'd offer this into evidence as a state's exhibit.
Pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 12D will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 340 in evidence.
Now, Dr. Jones, did you have an occasion to conduct an autopsy on the body of a person that was identified as Cody Amato?
I did.
And let me put what's already been introduced into evidence as State's Exhibit 298 and ask you to look at that. Is that the person upon whom you conducted an autopsy that was identified to you as Cody Amato?
It is.
And I'm going to ask you the same type of questions, with the exception of Cody Amato's head. Can you please describe the external condition of his body?
Yes. I'd like to refer to my report for this one as well.
For refresher recollection?
Yes, please. He was received clothed in teal scrub jacket, teal scrub top, teal scrub pants, black suspenders, black socks, black shoes, gray boxer briefs, and a black t-shirt. He also appeared well-nourished. And I did observe areas of blunt force trauma on his body, with the exception of his head. Well, actually, including portions of his head. Would you like me to go and describe them too?
Describe it, please.
Okay, so there was an area of bruising in the right temporalis muscle, which is the muscle that we use when we chew. And there was an abrasion on the right lower earlobe. On the front of the left forearm, there's a blue bruise. On the left lower back, there was an oval blue bruise. On the right lower back, there was a horizontal orange-red abrasion or scrape. And on the left knee, there was a crusted brown abrasion or scrape. And on the right leg, there was a red abrasion.
Okay. Now let me ask you about specifically his head. And the specific question is, do you observe any gunshot wounds to the head?
Yes, to the head and face.
Tell the jury about that. What did you observe?
So on the right cheek, there's a gunshot wound entrance, and that wound involved the skin, the soft tissue in the area, the right maxillary bone of the face, the right sphenoid bone of the skull. It crosses the midline and involved the brainstem, and it continued to involve the left cerebellar hemisphere of the brain and the left occipital bone of the skull. And finally, on the back of the head, there was a gunshot wound exit.
Now, Dr. Jones, what I'm going to do is I want to jump back to Chad because there was one question that I forgot to ask you, and I'm going to ask you it now. Same question that I asked with regard to Margaret Amato, and that's the distance of the muzzle of the gun. Did you observe any type of stippling or burns on Chad Amato's body that would in any way be indicative of a close-range shot?
No, I did not.
So once again, same question, what would that indicate to you then?
So it would indicate that the gun was in a close range fire. A gun that's in close range will exude any soot or cause any stippling marks to be present on the body, and I did not observe any of those.
So with regard to Chad Amato, that was not a close-range gunshot?
Correct.
Okay, going back to Cody, you described the injuries. What about the path of the bullet? Which direction was it going?
This wound course was from front to back, right to left, and downwards.
I'm showing counsel state's exhibit for identification 12M, 12N, 12O, 12P, and 12Q. May I approach the witness, Your Honor? Let me show you the state's exhibits that I just called off, and can you look at those?
These show the gunshot wound injuries to the face, head, and my my head diagram.
And with regard to the photographs, are they a true and accurate representation of the injuries and wounds that you observed on Cody Amato's head
They are.
and face? And with regard to the diagram, is it a true representation of the injuries that you observed to Cody Amato's face and head?
Yes, they are.
I'd offer them into evidence as state's exhibits, Your Honor. No objection, Judge.
All right, what's been pre-marked for ID is State's Exhibit 12M as in Mary will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 341 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID is State's Exhibit 12N as in Nancy will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 342 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID is State's Exhibit 12O will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 343 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID is State's Exhibit 12P as in Paul will be moved into evidence as 344 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID is State's Exhibit 12Q will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 345 in evidence.
Let me put up the 341 and ask you to tell the jury what we're seeing.
Okay, so we're looking at the right side of Cody's face, and just above the ruler, you can see the gunshot wound entrance and a bruise that's associated with it underneath the eye.
Let me show you 342.
And this is a little bit of a closer-up shot. We're opening the eye to show that the eye itself is not involved, but you can see the gunshot wound entrance in the center of the photo and the bruise.
Let me show you 343.
Here we're looking at the back of the head and scalp, and you can see within the hair there is an injury, which will later be described as gunshot wound exit.
Let me show you 344.
And just as I do with the other cases, I shaved the area where there was hair present, so you can see the actual injury. And this is gunshot wound exit on the back of his head.
And 345.
And this is my body diagram of Cody Amato, and I've drawn in the gunshot wound entrance below the right eye and the bruise that's underneath the eye. And then you can also see the gunshot wound exit that I drew in. Then I also, this indicates that little scrape or abrasion that was present on the right earlobe.
Now, with regard to the distance of the muzzle of the gun, and first of all, what can you, maybe obvious, but do you know what is the muzzle of a gun?
It's the end of the gun where the bullet comes out.
Were you able to, did you observe any type of stippling or burns to Cody Amato's face?
No, I did not.
And, well, once again, what is that indicative of?
Close range fire.
Right, the stippling, but the lack of stippling or burn on his face, what is that indicative of?
That there was no evidence of close range fire present.
And tell the jury what your definition again is of close range fire?
Once again, it depends on the weapon and the ammunition that's used, but it's usually 2 to 3 feet. But of course, if you have the weapon and test fire.
Is that wound that you observed to Cody Amato's face inconsistent with a self-inflicted wound?
It is inconsistent.
In other words, a suicide. It's inconsistent with a suicide?
It is.
I'm sorry?
It is.
Just generally speaking, within the field of forensic pathology, is there a term that's called the cause of death?
Yes.
And what is, I'm going to talk about this case specifically in a moment, but what is the term cause of death? What does that mean?
It's the injury or disease that leads to a person's death.
And within the field of forensic pathology, is there a term that's called the manner of death?
Yes.
And what is manner of death?
That's determination of what actually leads to the injury or disease. And there are 5 different manners.
And can you explain that, what the 5 different manners of death are?
There's natural, suicide, accident, homicide, and undetermined.
Now, with regard to, and I'll ask it as a group question, I won't go one by one, but with regard to Margaret, Chad, and Cody, what was the cause of death?
Margaret's cause of death was a gunshot wound of the head. Chad's cause of death was multiple gunshot wounds. And Cody's cause of death was gunshot wound of the face.
And with regard to Margaret, Chad, and Cody, what was the manner of their deaths?
Homicide.
I have no further questions.
Cross-examination?
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to Seminole County.
Oh, thank you.
Now, you are assisted in your office by an investigator?
Yes.
Okay. And his name, I believe, is Mr. Tootle? Is it?
Her name is Valerie Tootle.
I'm sorry. I didn't
That's
know her
okay.
first name.
That's okay.
Okay. Valerie Tootle?
Yes.
How long has she been working with you?
I don't know. I think a little less than a year.
Okay. You performed these autopsies on January 26th of this year?
I did.
Okay. These decedents passed away on January 24th?
I'm not sure. I know they were found on the 25th.
Okay, I'm sorry, they were found on the 25th?
Yes.
Okay. So you did the autopsies the next day?
I did.
Okay. Now, I want to talk to you, ask you some questions about the protocol and the procedures of the medical examiner's office, okay?
Okay?
When your office is notified when there's a suspicious death or a homicide?
Yes,
Okay. And you provide services for Seminole County, Florida?
we do now. Yes,
That's as of recently, right?
yes,
Okay. Is this your first time coming to Seminole?
it is.
It is? Okay. When you are notified that you need to come to Seminole County, where we have, in this case, 3 deaths, what's the first thing that your office does?
I'm not exactly sure what each investigator does. They generally meet the police at the scene, and they let me know that, or they let one of the doctors know that they're going to the scene.
Okay, that's, one of your investigators go to the scene?
Yes,
And in this case, it would be Valerie Tootle?
yes,
Okay. So she's dispatched to the scene, and then typically she's briefed about the situation or what might have happened or where the bodies are and such?
yes.
Okay. And what are her duties to write a report about what was told to her, or is that not done?
They do write a report, yes.
Okay. Do you have an occasion to review that report?
I do.
Okay. Did you review her report prior to performing the autopsies?
I believe I did, yes.
Okay. Are you provided with photographs that the crime scene investigator might have processed?
Yes.
Okay. Did you do all that in this case?
I can't remember if I saw the images before or after the autopsies were performed.
And who is responsible for, I don't want to minimize it, but packaging up the body and delivering it to your office?
Usually the investigators will, I guess, place them in the transport bags, and they are transported via one of our transport specialists to the
Okay,
office.
common knowingly as body bags?
Yes.
Okay. They're not in charge of gathering evidence or anything, they're in charge of just preserving the body as it's found and delivering it to your office?
Yes, generally the police will gather a lot of the evidence such as GSR, fingernail clippings and such before they come to the office.
The fingernail clippings are done before it comes to your office?
Yes, generally.
Okay. And if you need to review your notes, your report, on Chad Amato, there was clippings of the fingernails in that case?
Are you asking if they were done at the scene?
I'm just asking if they were done, period, first. And if they were they done at the scene?
Oh, I am referring to the report of Chad Amato because I don't have any recollection. Yeah, I know that we did not do any fingernail clippings in our office, so I can't tell you if they were done or not.
So if they were done, they would have been done by the crime scene analyst?
Yes.
Okay. And I noticed in your report on page 4, on the right posterior right index finger, there are red abrasions.
Yes,
Okay. Now, pursuant to your investigator, there were no paramedics involved in this matter?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Is proper procedure for the hands to be bagged at the scene?
Not if evidence has been collected or they don't intend for evidence to be collected.
Okay, so if you don't intend the evidence, they're not bagged for any reason.
Correct.
Okay. The body is bagged as it is found with the clothing on?
It depends on the scene and the investigating agency.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. Margaret Amato's body bag, was she delivered with clothing on?
In all of these cases, they all were received with their clothing on.
Okay. And the body bag, the body's put into the bag zipped up, transported, vehicle, ambulance, whatever, to your office?
Correct.
Okay. And these bodies were delivered to your office, I assume, on the 25th?
I have no idea when they arrived at our office.
Okay, but you performed the autopsies on the 26th, correct?
Yes.
Okay, now you were asked in order, Margaret, Chad, and then Cody, but in sequence, it looks like Cody's autopsy was performed at 11:30 on 1/26th?
I think they were all arbitrarily given numbers 191, 192, and 193, so I worked in numerical order.
Okay,
So-
well, I'm just looking, you can refer to your reports, I'm looking at your reports that Cody's was done at 11:30, Chad's was done at 12:30, and Margaret's was done at 13:30.
Yes.
That sound about right? Okay. Now, on your report, after, I'm looking, first of all, I'm going to go to Margaret's. Well, I'm going to go to Cody, since Cody was done first, okay? And if you could turn to Cody's report and turn to the death information section. The decedent section. I think it's after the toxicology report.
I don't think I know what that one looks like. Can I see it?
Yes,
what
may I
it looks
approach
like?
the
Sorry.
witness?
Okay, so the investigator's report.
I'm sorry, the investigator. You reviewed that, correct?
I did.
Okay. Ready?
Okay, I got it now.
Now, it asks if, talks about tobacco use. The scene information, had the decedent been moved? False. I assume false would be no?
Yes,
Okay. The date and time of the injury, 1/25/000. Does that mean unknown?
yes.
Okay. As far as a little bit higher, who identified the decedent section? It said the identification date was on 1/25/2019?
It does say that.
Okay, and that was done, the method to identification method was fingerprint scanning?
Yes.
Can you explain that to the jury, what that is?
That's something that's done on the scene by law enforcement. I'm not involved.
Okay, are you familiar with fingerprint scanning of the body?
Not really, no.
Okay, well, you don't know anything about it? I mean, are the fingers pressed up against something to identify it, or?
I'm guessing that it's kind of outside my area of expertise, so I don't,
I'm going to object
yeah.
if it's outside the doctor's, realm of knowledge, and she said, like a predicate speculation.
All right, if you could keep it to just the legal objection rather than speaking.
Okay. According to your investigation report, there was an identification date done on 1/25.
Yes,
And according to your investigative report, the method of identification was fingerprint scanning.
Your Honor, I'm going to object now, and the basis of the objection is hearsay. May we approach?
This is her report.
May we approach?
Correct.
Prior to doing the autopsies, you reviewed biographical information of the decedents?
Whatever was available, yes.
Whatever was available, you reviewed, didn't you?
Yes,
Okay. You reviewed your investigator Toodle's
yes.
narrative? You reviewed the identifying information?
Yes,
You reviewed where the body was found?
yes,
You reviewed the time and date it was found?
yes,
You reviewed the method of identification?
I can read it, yes.
Okay. And the method of identification for Chad Amato was fingerprint scanning?
I think we're on Cody Amato, but I have to check.
You can
the
check Chad.
record for Chad as well. Yes,
And you reviewed that fingerprint scanning identification was done on January 25th of 2019?
yes,
Thank you. Now, when you prepare to do the autopsy, when it's received, you unzip the bag, correct? And place it on a table?
well, the bag is opened.
Yes, ma'am.
They're imaged as they're in the bag, and then the clothing can be removed, and then the bodies can be placed on a table.
And then, before you start performing your autopsy, what you testified earlier, you go out on the outside of the body, you examine the outside of the body.
That's correct.
Okay. At what point do you clean the body?
Only after the external portion of the body's been examined.
Okay. And you did that in all three decedents in this case?
Yes.
I don't have anything further, Judge.
Redirect.
Dr. Jones, with regard to Chad Amato, that first shot, or the shot to the back of the ear, was that, in and of itself, not the second, but the first, to the back of the ear, was that a fatal shot?
It's hard to say if that one was, it did involve the skull and the brain, which can cause a lot of concussive effects, and eventually could be a lethal shot.
Immediately, would it immediately cause his death?
Probably not immediately, no.
Members of the jury, do you have any questions of this witness? Okay, write them down. All right. Mr. Dowdy, if you want, you can ask your question before.
Thank you very much. Dr. Jones, was Arthur Lubart and Christine Snyder present at the autopsy?
I have to refer to the report.
Refer to your report.
It will, yes. Yes, they were.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
All right, doctor, our jurors have some questions for
Okay.
you. Could a person still have motor or movement function after the type of wound shown in Exhibit 333? Can we get Exhibit 333, please? Could a person still have motor or movement function after the type of wound shown in Exhibit 333?
It's possible. I'm not entirely sure, but I think it would be possible for a little bit.
Could a person survive the type of wound in Exhibit 333 if medical attention was received?
That's a hard one to say. Once again, I don't know if you guys know, but gunshot wounds, we always think they do a drilling action, but the bullets, as they exit the muzzle, they actually have a lot of kinetic energy associated with them. So as they go through a wound track, they form a temporary cavity. And it's especially important if it's inside the brain, where you have the skull, which is a very rigid area, and the brain, that it can only expand so much inside that rigid skull. So, you know, there certainly are a lot of effects that occur on the brain that we may not see because the temporary cavity is just that, it's a temporary thing. We don't actually see that at the autopsy. So I don't know if somebody could survive that one.
Is it possible for a person to fall into a fetal position from a standing position without any external forces being applied?
Yes.
How close would a person need to be for stippling to occur on the victim?
So stippling occurs between 1 centimeter and up to, once again, depending on the gun and the ammunition that's used, up to the 2-3 feet.
Is there any indication on the blunt force trauma of Chad and Cody correlated to time of death?
As far as, some of the injuries were older and healing when I described them as crusted. That just means that it's like a scab, like brown scab that you guys would see. The redder ones are probably around the time. I can't say if it occurred before they died or right at the time that they died. And when I describe an injury as orange or yellow, that probably is something that might have occurred kind of after the blood is circulating in the heart. So it doesn't have that nice red appearance to it.
Can you tell time of death?
No.
Are you able to give or determine approximate time of death for each of the victims? If so, can you tell us?
No, I can't.
Did you photograph Chad Amato's hands/fingers, and did anything about them stand out? Did you note anything about them?
Their images were taken, and they were bloody.
Also, was fingerprint scanning done for all fingers on Chad?
I don't know the answer to that.
And the other ones relate to the time of death, that same question. So is there any questions, Mr. Stone, follow-up questions that you have based on the jurors' questions?
No questions, Your
Mr. Dowdy, do you have any follow-up questions based on the jurors' questions?
Honor. No, ma'am.
Jurors, do you have any more questions of this witness? Everyone's indicating no. May this witness be excused and released, Mr. Stone.
I'm sorry?
May this witness be excused and
Yes, Your
released. All right. Thank you very much, ma'am. You're excused and you're released from your subpoena. You're free to go.
All right, thank you.
What we're going to do, members of the juries, we're at this point just going to take a brief recess, just a short 5-minute break for afternoon break because we kind of started a little bit earlier, and then we're going to go through and have our next witness from there. Okay? All right, you may be seated. And Mr. Stone is your next expert here.
I don't know. I assume she is.
Okay, well, you can check on her while we're taking our recess.
Yes.